Hello, everybody. I hope you are all safe and healthy and maintaining your sanity in this coronavirus world that we now find ourselves in. If you are a rental property owner or investor, you might have some questions about the executive orders to stay in place and what this means to you. We still have tenants to take care of, buildings to maintain, units to fill, and bills to pay. It's not always clear which of those activities are considered essential and which ones will get us in trouble. Luckily, the Rental Property Owners Association has been in communication with the governor's office here in Michigan, and we are going to clarify what you can and can't do in this very special episode with Clay Powell, the director of the RPOA. Clay?
Hey, good morning, Brian. Good to see you.
You as well. Thanks for being here. It's we don't normally do things under these circumstances.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And certainly not from my home.
Yeah. Well, it's a good opportunity for you and I to talk about a lot of the questions that the RPOA is getting. And you put out an excellent Facebook post a couple of days ago, which answered a lot of those questions. And I'd like to go through question by question and just get the answer from you.
Sure, absolutely. We're getting dozens of calls every day. I would say we probably got close to 100 calls last Monday and Tuesday, just going crazy at the office. Just a FYI, even though our office is physically closed, we have staff members manning the phone. So feel free to call us, or if you have an email for the RPOA, shoot us an email if you have a question. We can also try to clarify things that maybe you didn't quite understand the day, or if you have new questions we haven't heard yet.
Well, let's get into those questions. Let's just get right into it. The first question here is, can I do yard cleanup at my rentals, send out an employee or my lawn care service to do this type of work?
Well, it seems at this point you can't. We've had some members test that a little bit last week, and one had sent their employee out to a property, and it didn't take very long for someone to notify the city, and the city came along and said, no, you should not be here. You need to go home because you're breaking the stay-at-home rule. So no, at this point, we would say not. And most of the property owners that I'm hearing from are saying they basically contacted their yard cleaning services, said discontinue that until further notice. At some point, obviously, we'll have to get back to that eventually. But right now, no go.
Well, luckily, the grass hasn't really started growing yet, but I'd imagine in a month, we'll be seeing some pretty tall grass.
Yeah, I've even held off putting fertilizer in my own yard just to keep that from happening.
What about repairing damages or broken items in a rental?
Well, those are certainly allowed if it's going to impact the health and safety of your tenants. That's part of keeping the critical infrastructure in place, which rental housing and housing in general has been included. So if you've got water that's not working, gas furnaces and stoves and those types of things that are not working properly, then certainly you or one of your staff or a contractor is going to go out and take care of that. Just to do a run by and look at the property, fix things that aren't health and safety related, that's probably a no-go as well.
So, Clay, what about showing rentals to prospective tenants? Is that still allowed?
Well, just like you can't show a property for sale, you cannot show a rental property to a prospective tenant. That doesn't mean you can't do other things you need to do to lease a property, but you can't do that.
So would you do like a virtual showing, or how would you handle that?
Well, everybody's got to figure that out on their own. Some people are just throwing up their arms going like, I just can't do it because they don't have the wherewithal to make that happen otherwise. But certainly if you have the wherewithal of making it happen through a virtual tour or otherwise, you could certainly do that. Then the question becomes, what happens if you go to a property to do a videotape or something like that? Are you going to be told you shouldn't be doing that? So it's a little bit of a struggle.
Okay, well, what about taking care of the things that are necessary to lease a unit or move in a new tenant?
Well, the governor's office has told us that anything that's required to move a tenant in or to move a tenant out, to get leases signed, to do the kind of closings that you might need to do in order to make that happen are allowed. Of course, they're telling you that you should use all the caution that they've recommended, staying 6 feet away, doing as little as possible in person, doing it remotely wherever possible, and using other precautions just to make sure that you're not infecting others.
So it's okay to do what's necessary as long as you're taking precautions to move a tenant in or out of a unit. What if you are in the process of evicting a tenant?
Well, at this point in time, you really can't do an eviction, and I don't believe any you'll find a court officer in the state of Michigan that's going to assist you with that, because they're not. Basically, there's a moratorium on that until April 17th. So you're probably not going to have to worry about it when it comes to that. You're just going to have to wait around and see what happens. I just a little word of caution with the move out piece. The governor's office has said that really only should be moving someone out if they're moving to secure housing somewhere else, and that's important. The overall message from the governor's office is they want to keep people housed. So if you need to move someone in, you need to move them out to go somewhere else. That's great, but you can't evict anybody. You've got to wait around for that.
I can understand why we can't evict tenants for not paying rent, because we want people to have a home during this time. But what about tenants who are doing criminal activity or maybe threatening, or, just overall bad tenants who normally you would want to get out as quickly as possible?
Right. Well, there are three things that the state court administrator's office has told us that we can evict for. The one on the list is for drug activity, and many of us know that's a 24-hour notice for drug activity. If you've got dangerous criminals in your property, that's probably also an option for you, although they didn't specifically say anything other than drug activity to me on the call. However, perhaps that would work. And a serious continuing health hazard is another option for you. So if you have a fire, if you have some other kind of structural damage, something like that, you certainly could feel free to ask the tenant to move at that point. And if they refuse to do so for whatever reason, you could theoretically pursue an eviction for that as well. So those are a couple of the big items that you can evict for. But the other one would be, if one of your tenants is threatening bodily harm to either you as a landlord, or your employees, or other tenants, or neighbors, that would be another good reason to do that. But for just general breaches of the lease, non-payment of rent, it's going to be a no-go for a while.
Well, what if I already have a writ? Can I still carry that out?
Well, SCAO tells us, yes, court should be doing that. However, I think it's going to depend on the locality, whether or not the police department or the court officers are going to help you and assist you in those cases is probably up for grabs. If you have already have a judgment and you're going to the courts for a writ, it may take a while to get that signed, even in cases where the writ falls under those three items I just mentioned, which is probably likely the only evictions that would get carried out if you have a judgment.
What is the message we should be giving to our tenants? I mean, some of them might think, oh, this is a rent holiday. I don't have to pay rent, and I'm just not going to do it, and I'll never have to pay it. Is that the case?
Well, that's certainly not the case, and it's very scary, though. A lot of the stuff you see come out in the media always starts off with something about, do you have to pay rent? Are you going to get evicted, et cetera, et cetera. Just saw a story this morning in the USA Today that always scares me. They always reverse everything in those articles. They finally get around to the bottom of the article saying, no, you can't skip paying your rent. Eventually, you're going to have to pay your rent. All these orders from different states and at the federal level basically saying that your landlords are out, will have to defer the rent in some cases, depending on what state you're in. In the state of Michigan, of course, tenants can't be evicted, but however, they still owe you the rent. And one thing that the RPOA has suggested that landlords do as a good business practice is contact their tenants, let them know if they have a hardship from employment, reduced wages, et cetera, that due to the virus situation, that they will work with the tenant, perhaps reducing rent for a short time, deferring that rent to a later date. One of the recommendations one of our members had was, we could spread that balance of that rent due over the remaining period of the lease. So we think those are great ideas. It's certainly better than trying to fight something that you can't do anything about. If you can't evict someone for non-payment, what's the point of pursuing that at this point? Well, work with your tenants, make everything work for everybody so that ultimately we get the money that we're owed and that the tenants can get a break up front.
What is the RPOA's message to tenants?
Well, I would suggest you contact your rental property owner and or your property management company and keep them informed about what's happening in your particular circumstances. There'll be some tenants, of course, that won't have issues. They'll be very fortunate. They still have jobs and still have income coming in. But there'll be others. They're going to be facing challenges, and they need to communicate with the rental property owner and I guess ask them if they need assistance and then communicate what might help. I guess tenants should think about, what can I really afford to pay? I think just saying I'm not going to pay anything because I don't think I should have to is not a good approach. But I would suggest that they should consider paying something and let their rental property owner know and the property manager know what they can afford and what they'll be able to afford in the future, and work out something that works for both parties.
And then what is the RPOA's position on reducing rent or deferring rent?
We think it's a good business practice to consider doing that where it makes sense. Doing it for everybody certainly doesn't make sense. This doesn't apply across the board. If someone's employed still and still making the money they were making, of course, there doesn't really seem to be a reason for that. But for all other cases, it just makes sense to try to avoid evictions down the road. We know that what's going to happen when the time period rolls around, whenever that might ultimately be, when evictions are allowed, that the courts are going to get slammed with lots of complaints for evictions of all different kinds. And trying to avoid that and not getting involved in that would be extremely helpful, I think, in collecting money from this point going forward. I just heard this morning that the State Court Administrator's Office, the Supreme Court judges, and others are getting together to talk about suspending, changing, et cetera, different rules and different types of cases across the state. And of course, one of those things is going to be landlord-tenant courts. So we're trying to give them some feedback on what we think should and shouldn't be done in that respect. And we're hoping that they don't defer sending out summons and things like that for an extended period of time, just exacerbating our situation that we may be facing.
So how is the Rental Property Owners Association working with the state to help soften the blow for landlords?
Well, we've had 3 meetings now with the governor's office to talk about different various strategies that they might be able to use. The first couple of meetings were kind of, if we can get some funding, and this is the state saying this, if we get some funding from the federal government through their recent passage of a bill, we might be able to do something. And of course, we know that's happened now. The state is now looking specifically at what they might be able to do. I think if you're a property owner that's involved with MSHDA financing, you've probably received a notice on that they're going to be suspending some issues there so that you don't have to worry so much about mortgage payments and those types of things to help with the situation. Other things that are being discussed is giving the landlord some form of relief in terms of rental payments for tenants who can't make payments for certain income classes. We have not got any specifics on that. I'd hoped to hear specifics on Monday. I did not. So I hope there'll be another meeting and we'll hear something before the end of this week on that topic.
So for rental property owners and landlords who are deferring rent or foregoing evictions at this point, which you have to anyway, will we eventually be able to collect that rent?
Well, a technical answer to that question is you should be able to, because like it's been said, the tenants are not let off the hook from paying the rent. If you work out something that that your tenants can handle, you should collect all of your rent. But ultimately, if that doesn't work out, then you should be able to go to court at some point to collect the rent. But the attorneys involved with the RPOA, they're basically saying to everyone, do this in a way that works the best for you. And just to understand that when the floodgates are opened in the courts, there'll be a lot of people trying to do the same thing, and it could be a while. So prepare yourself for a period of time in which you might not be collecting rents.
Well, what about other business activities then that aren't necessarily specific to repairs or moving a tenant in or out of a rental unit? Can a landlord engage in those activities?
Just like all other businesses, anything you can do remotely, you're allowed to do, avoiding going into the office and those types of things. That's kind of what the state has told us at this point. It's off the table to be going to your property management office if there's not a need that's directly related to, supporting the rental unit itself in terms of repairs and maintenance and those kinds of things, and that you should be doing what you need to do remotely. And then if you absolutely have to, for whatever reason that's acceptable, meet with a tenant in some way, shape, or form, or go to the property. You need to take those proper precautions.
So what about going to my rental property to deal with any disturbances that might be impacting other tenants?
I wouldn't recommend that you do that. In most circumstances, if there's calls about things that are really a problem, would suggest that you try to communicate with the tenant remotely in some way, shape, or form, as we all do through text and email and phone calls and those kinds of things. But if things get out of hand, the best course of action is probably to call the police. They're the ones that can really do something about it, and then maybe let you know what's going on and how you might be able to handle it from that point forward.
Is trash removal service, is that an essential activity?
Yeah, part of the executive orders included sanitation as an acceptable thing that needed to continue to be done. So we're all going to see, those garbage trucks running around our neighborhoods picking up trash. So yeah, your tenants should be doing that. No one should be piling up trash in their house and making those situations worse.
A question for our realtors out there, or anyone selling their property: can you actually show your property to a prospective buyer?
No, you really aren't supposed to. Did hear just 2 days ago that appraisers and other folks like that can operate. So insurance providers and those kind of folks can still do what they're needed to. They need to do to close on a property. So if you've already got a property in the process of closing, apparently you can do that. I think that goes along with the whole idea of keeping people housed, not, creating situations where people find themselves on the street and no place to go.
What if you're in the process of rehabbing a unit or doing any sort of construction project? Is that still allowable?
Well, I think the general feeling is that this is a hard one to answer. Construction activities are allowed for the critical housing needs, so on and so forth. But I think some caution needs to be taken there. Obviously, construction activity related to bridges and roads and keeping the infrastructure around us in good condition is allowed. Maintaining your properties is allowed. There is some question of whether or not you should have construction workers on site doing buildings and those kind of things. They've certainly given the thumbs up to plumbers and all those kinds of folks that are doing repairs to do work like that. But I guess if you're a contractor, I would recommend that you contact the Builders Association or someone who's going to be more up to speed on those intimate details of how that's going to have to, what's going to happen in that regard.
Just to be clear, are people who repair homes considered critical infrastructure employees?
Yes, it seems like they are at this point. Like I said, as long as it's a health and safety kind of activity, not just cosmetic repairs.
Clay, what if someone is in the process of getting their property certified or getting some sort of rental certification from the city?
Well, most of what I've seen so far, especially in Grand Rapids, Michigan, they have pretty much put a hiatus on any activity related to rental certifications, rental inspections, those kinds of things. There was some question about whether or not they would follow up with nuisance types ordinance violations like trash in the yard, tall weeds and those kind of things. But so far it seems like, even though I've not got a specific answer, they're not going to be following up on those things. So it looks like communities are going to be extending their certifications out for an extended period of time, maybe 1, 2, or 3 months. So you're going to need to check with your local municipality to see what the case might be. But it's pretty clear right now that inspectors and property owners shouldn't be going to a tenant's house to do any kind of rental inspection at this point.
And then what about RRP courses? First of all, explain to our listeners what RRP is.
RRP is EPA's Renovate, Repair, and Painting Rule certification. So if you're doing work on a rental property built before 1978, as you know, you have to be certified to do that work if you're disturbing so much area that has lead in it. Questions have come up for those folks who have a need to renew that certification in the month of April or May. What's going to happen with that? We haven't heard anything specific from EPA yet. I'd kind of hoped that we would hear something after the new rules were passed and the package was passed at the federal level, but nothing so far. But you can take the class online. But that only lasts 3 years. The in-person renewal last 5 years, but that's the one downside to the online. So if you check with some recent posts that we've done, we've provided links to places you can go to get that online recertification. So you don't have to worry about that so much. It just might change how you do it. Although I've had some folks tell me they'd rather take the class in person, and if their certificate expires, that means they have to take the whole 8-hour course again. But that's, of course, a choice that someone has to make.
Let's talk about the classes that the RPOA does offer. I know we've canceled for April at least. Have we canceled for May as well?
Well, we've only canceled for April. We're leaving the door open for May. At this point, we don't know really what's going to happen. The office at the RPOA is closed until the end of April. We're going to keep our pulse on what's going on and figure out what's going to happen with that. But don't fear, because you can still take some education from the RPOA. We are trying very hard to get all of the courses that we've recorded in the recent months put online for folks to go in and watch. So there is ability to do that. You just go to online, go to education on our website and look for online training. And as of yesterday, we had 8 of our courses ready to go. We have 3 additional ones in the can that we hope to get up very, very soon. So how to do evictions, land contracts, leases, all those types of things. There is something online for you to get an education, and what a great time if you're at home to take advantage of that and watch those courses. So it's recording of the live event in the office with PowerPoints. You're going to get the same thing you would get if you came to the office, without, of course, the ability to interact. But it's a great opportunity for folks to try it out, and we'll be putting out as many as we can as soon as we can.
Yeah, never in the history of mankind have so many people had so much time to spend at home. And you can either spend that time watching Netflix, or you can take that time and actually get some education. And I think the RPOA has some excellent courses. So I would highly encourage people to check out our courses. They're very reasonably priced. I mean, tell us a little bit about how they would find those courses and what the average cost is.
Well, you go to the RPOA website at rpoaonline.org. Go to the education tab. You'll see a list of events coming up, but you're also going to be able to see a selection called online education courses. So just click on that. You'll be taken to a page. It has a little icon of each of the courses that are currently available. Online courses are $45 each. You just pay for those, and it's for a member or a non-member. And they'll download it into your shopping cart, and then you can open them up and watch them.
And these are courses taught by real investors, real people who are actually doing it. It's not just theory, it's actual practice and actionable materials.
The course that you do for us is on there, up and ready to go. So
yeah, check out my course on advanced financial analysis. If you've ever wanted to know how I run my numbers when I invest in a multifamily, apartments, any type of commercial, really, watch my course. You'll see the tools that I use.
It's a great course, and we're lucky to have that up there.
I'd love to see people go check it out. Go to rpoaonline.org to check out that course and all the other courses that are up there. Now is a great time to do it. I highly recommend it. Clay, how else can people rely on the RPOA during this difficult time? Well,
one of the things that we have online, of course, is our knowledge base. So if you have questions, we probably have an answer. In fact, during this time off, when I'm at home and I'm, things are getting a little slower, I am actually writing more knowledge-based articles now to kind of fill those gaps where we maybe don't have a good answer or an answer at all on our website. So, go there first, search in the search box. We probably have an answer to your question already somewhere on our website. We certainly have a link right from our slider on the home page. If you have questions about anything that you and I have talked about this morning, we have all those answers listed there as well. So, and we'll keep updating that as we get answers to questions that keep coming up. But we also have staff on the phones. We're taking turns every day and answering those phone calls and answering your questions. Be patient, though. Sometimes the phone might be busy. Our staff is trying very diligently to pick up those as quick as possible. If you need to leave a message on their phones, certainly do that.
What's the phone number to call?
Sure. The main phone number is 616-454-3385. Also, you can send us an email at contact@rpoaonline.org, and our staff is also watching for those emails. And if you happen to have the direct email for one of our individual staff person, feel free to email them directly with your questions, and they'll get back to you. We're there from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday still.
All right. Any final thoughts for our landlords and rental property owners?
Hey, I just want to say to everybody, patience, I guess. We hope we'll get through this. We know we're going to have some ups and downs. It's going to take us a little while to get back where we were once it's all said and done. But I think it's going to happen. Just do everything you can do to make it work for you. And, based upon some of the stuff that you and I have talked about today, Brian. And we'll keep our fingers crossed this all goes away sooner than later.
I second that thought, and we will keep people updated. We'll keep doing these podcasts, special podcasts, as more information becomes available. I think, Clay, you and Karub and Associates, or Karub Associates, are doing a great job working with the governor's office, getting answers to these questions that everyone has. We may not like the answers, but you have found them for us. So thank you very much.
We'll keep working on it. You're welcome. Appreciate it.